Happy Monday. We're here for our weekly live Q&A and topic discussion. Thank you for submitting questions, everyone who's been submitting them. We are saving those and are going to work our way through those for these Monday sessions. So one I had coming up from a week or two ago was car barking. I don't know how many of you struggle with car barking, but it's a bit of a pain, I know. Can be really irritating. I am going to go ahead and launch our presentation for today, and we're going to talk about just some basic approaches to decreasing your dog barking in the car. All right. Here we go. So, car barking. This is when, I don't think I really have to explain it to you, but if you're in your car driving around and your dog sees something they're either worried about, interested in, who knows, they bark. They bark. And you're just trying to drive. It's really difficult to know what to do in that situation because you really can't divide your attention between your dog and the road. You have to watch the road. So what can we do to make our drives a little more peaceful here? All right, so how can we stop car barking? How can we decrease it? If you've been with me a little while, you know that I prefer to give you the simplest, most effective tips that will get you results relatively quickly. So training a new behavior and then slowly moving it into a real life problem scenario, we definitely do that and show you how to do that, but that's too much for a lot of people, especially if there's something you can do that's easier. So let's look at what's easier. So there are these three topics or three approaches I'm going to talk about: blocking the visual that your dog has, so their line of sight to what they're barking at, giving your dog something else to do that is not barking and lunging, and rewarding quiet. So that's more of a active training approach. So blocking the line of sight. Now, obviously, this is only going to help you if your dog is barking at stuff because they see it. If they're barking at sounds or seem to be just sending forth their bark into the universe for no obvious reason that you can discern, this may not help you. But it's worth a try, actually, even if you're not sure if your dog is seeing things that they're barking at. And just a note about this picture, by the way, this is a stock photo, but that crate is too small for that dog. So your dog should have enough room to stand up comfortably in a crate. So crates are a great option for blocking the line of sight if you use an opaque crate. So in this picture, this dog is in one of those plastic Very kennels. And you can see that this is something like a Subaru. And if they close that trunk, the dog probably is too low to see out the window. So they won't be able to see outside the car. Now, if you had a crate like this in the back seat, and especially if it were a taller crate for a bigger dog, and they could see out the window through the door of the crate like this, I would probably cover it just with a light blanket or towel. Make sure that they're, unable to see out and see things to bark at. Now, do your homework on crates in cars. There's a lot of advice out there about which crates are safer than others, which are sturdy enough, and there really aren't many crates that are sturdy enough to stand up to an actual car crash. Regardless, you do want to, for this purpose, for barking, you want to block the line of sight. So if you were using a crate that isn't solid like this one, you would need to cover it with something so they can't see out. But I'm not qualified really to give safety advice about different kinds of crates. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so this is not my favorite suggestion, but I wanted to mention it because I have seen some suggestions online to block the windows of the car with like towels or sheets. And this isn't really safe and probably not legal, at least in many places. You need to be able to see out the windows of your car in order to drive safely and to be able to see what's coming. So I can't recommend that you actually block the side windows and the back windows so that you can't see anything. You could try these shades that are made for little kids, like the one shown in this photo. Obviously, it's safer because it's not totally opaque. So that also means it might not be that effective for reducing your dog's barking, but you could give it a try. And if you do, let me know. I would love to hear if you get results with these. All right, so those were our options for blocking the visual, trying to keep your dog from seeing the stuff they're going to bark at. And if you can fix your barking problem with using a crate, an opaque crate, great, you're on your way, all is well. Now, giving your dog something else to do in the car is never a bad idea, even if you're already using a crate that prevents your dog from seeing things to bark at. And so you can use this strategy, giving your dog something to work on in the car, with or without the crate. Okay, so how to keep your dog busy. You give them something that will really hold their attention, that they absolutely love. It will help keep their head down so they're not looking out the window all the time. So even if they're not in a crate, it's likely to decrease barking because they're doing something else. They're busy doing something else and they're not looking out the window. Now, what kind of things can we use to occupy our dog? Whatever they like in the house may not be high enough value. When they're in the car, they can see out into the world. There's lots of interesting stuff going on. So you're probably going to need something that is more valuable than, the bone that they kind of like at home. So these are just suggestions. You know your dog best. But bully sticks for some dogs are very high value, so a long-lasting chew like that could be great. This middle thing on the top is a licky mat. For those of you who aren't familiar, these are textured silicone mats that you can spread any kind of gooey dog treat you would like. You can then freeze it too to make it last longer. And these are one of my favorites, as long as your dog is not inclined to eat the mat itself. For keeping dogs busy. They get quick reinforcement because it's easy for them to access the food right away. Whereas the Kong, which is that red thing in the upper right there, a lot of you already know about Kongs. These can be great too if your dog is already a Kong expert, but it's harder to get stuff out of the Kongs. So if it's too much effort, your dog may rather bark out the window. So something to keep in mind, and you may need to experiment. Don't give up if the first thing you try doesn't work well. You have lots of options. Now, it matters a lot what you put in the Kong or on the licky mat. These are just some generic suggestions that tend to be high value for many dogs, but may not be for your dog. Peanut butter, meat-based baby food, so the little jars of Gerber that are, chicken or turkey or beef or whatever. Those are really valuable to a lot of dogs. You may, if you use something like that, that's a little bit runnier, I would recommend freezing that before giving it to your dog in the car. Otherwise, it won't last very long because it's pretty easy for them to lap up. And then just canned dog food can also be pretty high value to a lot of dogs, especially if what they normally eat for meals is dry food like kibble or something. So high value foods in a way that will sort of stretch them out and make them last a while. All right, let's take a look at Coco, our girl Coco, who is going to be getting a licky mat in the car. So Coco's already in the car. Rachel is bringing a licky mat, one of those textured silicone mats, and from the looks of it, I think it's Easy Cheese or Velveeta that's spread across it. So if your dog were in a crate, you would give it to them in the crate or, just put it on the seat like so. And you can see right away she can start licking it and getting, reinforcement, getting good stuff for that behavior. So just another look at that. She was looking out the window and now she's like, oh, Easy Cheese, why didn't you say so? Now we're going to move on to that last type of intervention. There we go. Which is rewarding quiet. Now the thing about rewarding quiet, and the reason I saved it for last, is that it is, in my opinion, the least likely to get you the results you want. And that's not because it doesn't work in theory, but it's really difficult to consistently train in the car. You really cannot safely do good training while you are active training anyway, while you are operating a car. It's not very safe. You really need to focus on what you're doing. So what you're going to see in the example here is where you have a passenger who can help and who's delivering the treats and watching the dog. So they only have to do the training. They are not trying to drive. But because I know you're not always going to have a passenger, probably, that's why this is kind of at the end. It's like, yes, you can do this, but if you don't do it consistently, you may not have good results. So, and if you can get the results you want with a licky mat and a crate, that's going to be much less labor for you. Okay, let's look at another little video of this. So here we've got Coco in the back seat, and I have on here, because I know I'm going to get a little flack for this, that it is safer to have your dog restrained in the car, either by a seatbelt or a crate. So, but I know a lot of you don't do that and have your dog just in the back seat. So, but I want to acknowledge that yes, it is safer to have them restrained, if nothing else, so they don't become a projectile in a crash. All right, safety bits aside there. Let's look at Coco getting treats from the passenger, not the driver. She was just looking out the window. She's being quiet. She sees some triggers. She eats some more food. I have this muted because I find it's hard for me to talk over often, but my guess is that mom is, making some noises to get her attention. But you don't have to wait for your dog to do something that you cue in order to reward them necessarily. If they're looking out the window quietly, that's fine, right? You would be fine with that. So go ahead and reward it. Sometimes if you take the time to try to ask them to look at you when they're looking out the window quietly and they're not responding, you miss an opportunity to reinforce something else that's good, because then they'll end up barking. Like they're staring. You're like, look over here, look. They don't look. You haven't reinforced them looking out the window, and then they bark. So I'm a big fan of opportunistically rewarding things that you're okay with. It just will help you make faster progress. Okay, so that was really short, so let me just rewind this again. So here they're actually parked, which is a great place to start actually for practice for you. Oh, she saw a bike, okay. Gonna get some cheese. Ooh, I'm gonna look out here some more. Now they're moving. Yes, it would be safer for her to be restrained. She's seeing whatever. And even if you can't tell if your dog is seeing anything, if they're sitting quietly in the car looking around, I wouldn't let that go. I would reward that. You don't want to squander these opportunities, especially if your dog is really barky in the car and you don't know how much quiet time you're going to get. Try to reinforce them pretty frequently. Now, that said, you'll have to decide, if they do bark, how long to wait before reinforcing them for not barking, for being quiet. And how long to wait, it depends on your dog. I would say wait as long as you think you can get away with. Because the closer in time to barking you reward the dog, the more likely you are to actually reinforce barking. But I know in the beginning, sometimes you don't have a lot of time. There might only be brief pauses in barking. So take what you can get, but then start to build on that quickly. All right, so we talked about blocking the line of sight, using crates, or possibly window shades, as long as they're not actually totally opaque. Giving your dog something else to do in the back seat or wherever they are in the way back of the car. That could be a long-lasting chew, a licky mat, or a Kong. And most labor-intensive option, but feasible if you have a passenger, is to actively, watch your dog and reward quiet instead of barking. Now, I have not actually received this question yet, which I'm surprised about, but usually what I hear is, what if my dog won't eat in the car? So, if your dog won't take really high-value food in the car, my concern is that they're potentially a little bit anxious. So if they may be anxious or car sick, and car sickness, when a dog vomits, usually people say, oh, they can recognize they're car sick, but there are other signs that are a little less obvious, like really heavy panting, drooling, that can indicate that they're not nauseated. So either way, if your dog's not taking high-value food in the car, like won't take a free, meatball to save their life, I would go talk to your vet about the possibility of medications that can help either nausea in the car or anxiety in the car. because you may need that extra help if your dog is really on edge. All right, we have a question. Can you comment on dogs where you try to get that try to get your attention when you are driving as opposed to reacting to stuff outside the car? Yes. The dogs that want to climb into your lap and get under your foot, between your foot and the brake when you're driving. So probably for those guys, restraint would be really important. So a crate or a doggy seatbelt I would go with. And then for them, I would also definitely go with a car activity. You know, with little kids, you might give them like an iPad nowadays, or I don't know what people are giving little kids now. And when I was a little kid, we didn't have iPads, but they gave you something to do in the backseat so you wouldn't be so annoying. So kind of same concept for dogs. I might give them a licky mat, a Kong, a bully stick, and make sure they're restrained, especially if you have a dog who has that bad habit of trying to climb in the front seat with you, because you know that's really dangerous. Now, they do also make those dividers, like metal wire kind of mesh dividers that some cars have that can go between the far back of the car and the rest of the car, or maybe even between the back seat and the front seat, that can keep pets from getting forward. So that would also be an option. But even with that, or with the crate, if you know that they're going to be wanting something, and that something is you, I would give them something to do to, one, to just help them feel better so they're not just frustrated and keep trying to get to you. But also, if they've been getting attention from you while you're driving, and now you've prevented that by putting them in a crate or in a seatbelt, you may now suddenly find yourself with a barking problem that you didn't have before, because they're trying some other strategies to get attention. So yeah, for those attention hounds, crate, licky mat, or seatbelt.